Welcome to the Power in Motion podcast, the show for women who want to develop a kinder relationship with their body so you can feel healthy, happy, and confident without restricting food, doing torturous exercise, or constantly worrying about the number on the scale. I'm your host, Kim Hagel, size-inclusive fitness specialist and certified non-diet health and life coach specializing in body image. This podcast is here to provide weight-neutral, health at every size aligned information and coaching on sustainable habits and mindset shifts so you can feel your very best in the body you have right now. Let's lace up our runners and go for a walk while we chat. Hey friends, and welcome back to the Power in Motion podcast. I have a special interview to share with you today, but before we get into that, I just want to tell you about a special offer I have coming up to help you prepare for the holidays. Now, I know that the holidays can be a really busy, potentially stressful time with lots of extra stuff to do, places to go, shopping, spending, and then also constantly being surrounded by food. And at the same time, the diet industry is ramping up their marketing. It's a lot. I remember that feeling of pressure and overwhelm all too well, and it was really pressing on my heart this fall to create a low-ticket, low-commitment offer to help women navigate this season calmly and powerfully so that when the new year comes, you don't feel exhausted and depleted and like you need that restart that the diet industry offers. Rather, you can finish the year feeling satisfied and content and like you're on the right track and avoid that whole new year, new you trap. So, details about that offer will be dropping soon, and the one and only way to hear about it is by being on my email list. That's the only place where I'm going to be talking about this offer. So if you don't get my emails currently, then you're going to want to get on my list. And you can do that by visiting my website, www.radiantvitality.ca/resources, and then sign up for any of the freebies that I have on that page. Any of those will land you on my list, and you'll hear about this offer when it drops towards the end of November. All right, so on to this week's interview. Today, we're joined by Krista Beck. Krista is a registered dietitian, certified intuitive eating counselor, and dieter turned intuitive eater. Krista's mission is to help as many women as possible overcome diet culture, stop dieting for good, and mend their relationships with food and their bodies. In this episode, we spoke all about pseudo dieting or diets in disguise, because most people know that diets don't work and therefore don't follow a specific diet, but still try to control their weight by avoiding certain foods or only eating at certain times. And Krista teaches us how to tell if you are pseudo-dieting and how doing so could be working against you and what to do instead. So let's dive in. Well, hey, Krista, welcome to the Power in Motion podcast. It's so nice to have you here today.
Awesome. Thanks so much for having me. I'm excited to be here.
It's a pleasure. So I know we're going to have a great chat today about food and nutrition and dieting and diets in disguise and things like that. But before we get into all the good stuff, why don't you just introduce yourself to our listeners and tell us a little bit about how you came to be doing the work that you do?
For sure. So my name's Krista. I'm a registered dietitian and certified intuitive eating counselor, and I'm from Manitoba, Canada. So prior to becoming a registered dietitian, I was actually a dieter myself, or I would, I guess, call it a pseudo dieter, which I think we're going to talk more about. So that's kind of what brought me, I guess, to wanting to be a dietitian. But thankfully on that journey, I did find my way back to intuitive eating pretty early on before becoming a dietitian. So that was good. And I actually started my career solely as a clinical dietitian, but then soon realized my passion was more helping people overcome kind of what I overcame in terms of disordered eating and dieting. Mm-hmm. So just about over a year ago, I started my business, Dietitian Krista. And right from the start to my mission and my goal has always been to help others overcome diet culture, help them stop dieting for good, and just really mend their relationships with food and their body.
Yeah, it's such important work. And I know we're going to get into all of those struggles and how our habits can become so disordered. But you said a word in your introduction that stood out to me. We're all familiar with dieting, and like everybody who listens to this show knows that diets don't work. And most of the people who listen to the show would say that they don't diet or maybe have never dieted. But you said this word pseudo dieting. What do you mean when you say that?
So essentially, pseudo dieting is unconsciously dieting or unknowingly dieting. So a person isn't deliberately following a diet, but they're still letting food rules guide their decisions. So this could look like eating only like quote unquote healthy foods and
Mm,
avoiding anything they deem to be unhealthy. This could be like counting calories or macros. It could be skipping meals, restricting food or food groups. Carbs is a very common one. Also, like behaviors of overcompensating. So, for example, if they ate something they thought was unhealthy or bad, or they overate, they may think they need to do like an additional workout or something to burn it off.
mhm.
Um, so, like I said, I was 100% a pseudo dieter myself. So, for me, that was like the macro counting, the calorie counting, the restricting, the only eating foods I thought was super healthy,
Mhm.
basically.
Yeah. Yeah, and
And I
what's
think
the motivation behind that? Like, what do you think, um, propelled you to eat that way? What was the hope when you were engaging in those kinds of behaviors?
definitely to be in a smaller body.
Yeah.
And to lose weight. And I've never been someone who's been in a larger body either, but I had that, little extra bit of belly fat for me personally. And that is something I always wanted to get away. So I was constantly trying to, get toner or get smaller. And I think that is the intentions. Like people will recognize that they do want to lose weight. They want to be in a smaller body. I even have people come to me and be like, I've never actually dieted before, but I've been trying to lose weight for this many years. And then it's like, okay, well, what have you been doing to try to lose that weight, right? And then that's kind of when we get into that conversation because it's like, well, I try not to eat this, I try to do that, and then it's like, okay, so maybe what it is pseudo dieting, and you just don't really
Mhm.
realize what you're doing as a diet.
Yeah. Yeah. And what do you think is behind that desire to lose weight? Like, I mean, I know there are lots and lots of factors, but what do you think keeps bringing people back to that, even though they've tried it 10, 100,000 times and it hasn't worked?
I think people think that there is going to be a diet that works. Like you see in the internet, there's always like before and after photos and, people's success stories or their friends who've lost weight, and that's what they see. But what they're not seeing is when the success is no longer there, right? Like they're not
Yeah.
seeing when people are posting year, 2 years, 5 years down the road, they've gained the weight back. So the media advertising, like there's so much pushed at people, making them think like this is what you need. You can do this just if you do this diet. And then also just that pressure to be thin, right? Because people in larger bodies don't have it easier. There's a lot of weight stigma that they face. So it's like I guess we live in a very fat phobic world that people are just scared of becoming fat and thinking that they can do it. That's the other thing, right? I feel like people think that they can lose weight and they've seen people lose weight and they think the reason people gain back the weight is because, they failed at the diet when
Yeah.
really that's not the case.
Yeah. Yeah. There's a lot of like personal responsibility placed on the dieter or the pseudo dieter in the
For
media
sure.
and making it your fault. But well, something I always say is like, if you were buying an iPhone and they crapped out 95% of the time, iPhones would pretty quickly go out of business. And yet the diet industry continues to thrive, even though it has such a high failure rate.
Exactly.
But that's when you're speaking to the fat phobia is like, there's just so much stigma and fear around existing in this world in a larger body. So it makes sense. Makes sense that we keep
Yeah.
getting sucked back in.
Yeah. And like I totally understand that desire. And like you said with
Mhm.
the iPhone example, like the example I always use is like the cholesterol example, which I think the original intuitive eating pros use this example, but basically it's like, so diets have this 95% failure rates, 66% will gain back even more weight than originally lost, right? And it's like, well, what if you went to your doctor and you had high cholesterol and they said, we'll prescribe you this medication, but there's 95% chance it won't work. And there's a 66% chance that your cholesterol is going to get worse,
Yeah.
right? Like, would you take it? No. Like, would the doctor prescribe it? No. Like, would it have ever been approved? No, but
Yeah.
they're still prescribing weight loss in the same way, right?
Mm.
Even though it has those same statistics.
Yeah. Yeah. So let's kind of talk about how pseudo dieting is different from, but really at its roots similar to and the same thing as actually dieting.
Yeah, and really it is. It is a diet. It's just a diet without a name, right? Because I think if a
Mhm.
person, does Weight Watchers or keto or whatever it is, they know they're dieting. It
Yeah.
has a name. But because like things like macro counting still has a name, but like things like that, like trying to eat super healthy or just avoid other foods, there's not really a name to it. So people just don't recognize it as dieting behavior. But it's in every other way, it's the exact same with dieting. It's the same outcomes, the same effects, the same harms, the
Mm-hmm.
same ineffectiveness.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And how does this, we talked about the failure rates and how it's actually like you're more likely to gain more weight at the end of this type of behavior, but how else does dieting and pseudo dieting affect your life?
Yeah. So, I mean, it's really harmful for one thing, too, right? It's not just about this ineffectiveness. And I guess part of this is part of the harm can come from, I guess, in terms of ineffectiveness and harm, it does mess with your metabolism. So, if you're someone who requires 2,700 calories a day and you're only eating 1,900 calories, um, basically what's going to happen is your metabolism is going to slow down eventually, right? You're going to lose weight initially, then it's going to plateau, your metabolism slows down. Your body gets scared. It's like feels it's starved and it tries so hard to hold it on. And so that blunted metabolism, I guess, kind of goes into that ineffectiveness too. But other harms is the yo-yo effect of dieting
Mhm.
because no diets are sustainable. So people are on a diet, off diet, on a diet, off a diet. And with that, they're losing weight, gaining weight, losing weight, gaining weight, right? And this
Mhm.
weight cycling alone is a lot more detrimental for a person's health than if they were to just maintain their weight, regardless what their weight was. And it has been shown to be an independent risk factor for things like high blood pressure, inflammation, insulin resistance, heart disease. Like there's a lot of harmful effects of this yo-yo dieting, this weight loss effect that people are super unaware of.
Yeah, I'm so glad you brought that up because there's so much misinformation out there about BMI or fat being unhealthy. But really, as you say, the risk is in the losing and the regaining and losing and regaining over and over. Like your health is actually better if you just leave things well enough alone.
100%. And even
Yeah.
like with that BMI, there is actually studies that show, like, and I think we both know BMI is crap, but like there's
Mhm.
studies that show that people in, I think it was like the underweight category had an increased risk of mortality compared to those in the overweight. So those in the normal and underweight basically had this increased risk of mortality compared to those in the overweight category.
Yeah.
So like when you look at studies like that, it's like clear that it has nothing to do with this weight, this
Arbitrary number.
your weight divided by your height, or whatever it is actually.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I often talk about, like, the BMI. I mean, first of all, it's so old. It was
Yeah.
invented centuries ago, and it wasn't even invented by a medical professional, right? It was not
No,
intended for the reasons that it's being used these days, right? It's completely antiquated, so
for sure.
yeah. Okay, so let's talk even broader. How does being in diet mode affect your relationships and your emotions and your mindset? Like, what are some of the broader effects of life of just constantly staying in this mode of trying to lose weight?
Yeah. So it definitely affects all those things like your relationships, your quality of life, your life satisfaction. Um, I guess even just thinking of a time you're on a diet. So say for example, you are intermittent fasting and you're at work and they're having a potluck at work at noon, but you can't eat till like 4 o'clock in the afternoon. So like just think about how that can affect even something as simple as that, but over and over again, right? You could either choose to, hide out in your office and hide away from your coworkers and not go, or a person could choose to go to this potluck, but tell themselves they're not eating anything and be starving the whole time, thinking of food the whole time, probably pretty irritable.
Mhm.
Call it a cheat day, give in, indulge in all this food and feel really guilty. So just little things like that, like your day to day living is very impacted. Or if you're counting macros, like it makes it really hard to go to a friend's house for dinner. Enjoy your mom's home cooked meal, or you're on the keto diet. Okay, well, your family's going for ice cream. You can't go, you can't do those things.
Yeah. I missed out on so much when I was in my dieting and pseudo dieting days too. And another thing that I noticed is like when you talked about the potluck example, I can remember being at several and not eating and being so proud of my willpower, but I was not comfortable with the attention it drew to me, right? People were always talking about or commenting on my food choices or the fact that I wasn't eating and like how strong I was and how disciplined and healthy, which was anything but, right? And
Yeah.
I felt so centered out, right? And I was like, "You don't understand how much I wanna eat that food right now, and I can't,"
Mhm.
right? Like,
And
it's
that's the other thing, like, people praise these behaviors.
Mhm.
So it's like these behaviors that are so disordered are given so much praise. And like that was the case for me too. I used to count macros and like I would weigh even my spinach that I'd put like, 4 pieces on my sandwich and I'd weigh that. It was ridiculous. And I would get, praise for that. Like, oh, you're so good. How do you do that? Oh, you go to the gym 6 times a week and you work out for an hour and a half and then you might run at night. Like, wow, you're good. You're dedicated. And it's like, no, I have issues.
Yeah. Yeah, you have no idea, right?
At the time, I didn't know that. I was like, "Yes, I know. Thank you. I am." But no,
Yeah, well,
not at
the
all.
praise feels really good when you're feeling like I mean, I felt so chaotic and out of control, right? But, like, to hear that, "Oh, I must be doing this right. Okay, that then good. I can stay the course," right?
Yeah,
But yeah, when I look back, I think, "Oh, it was such a miserable time." It was just
for
so
sure.
so sad.
And
Yeah.
that's the same thing with, like, the praise for weight loss too, right? Like, so many
Mhm.
people are so quick to praise people when they notice weight loss, and it's like, half the time you don't even know what you're complimenting. Like, it could be an eating disorder, it could be cancer, it could be extreme stress, like, a person could have had a miscarriage, like, all these things could be going on, and you're complimenting their weight loss. And, like, even in the case where a person, wants like, it's clearly trying to lose weight, you know that about them. Now you're just reinforcing the fact that they weren't good enough before, and, like, how do you think they feel when they gain it back, right? So
Yep.
these praising these behaviors and, like, body size and weight loss, like, it's actually a lot more detrimental than
Mhm.
people are aware of.
Yep. Yep. I had so much fear when I was in a smaller body of, like, what will people think if I gain the
Mhm.
weight back, right? Like, that fear of rejection perpetuated a lot of negative and I take responsibility for that. That's nobody else's fault. But it's just, it's something to be aware of when we make those comments that they are being received in a way that can be pretty harmful.
For sure, and, like, it is people just trying to be nice and giving
Mhm.
compliments, but it is something to take into consideration, I guess, next time
Yeah,
someone's
100%.
going to make a comment.
Yeah. So if someone recognizes that either they are for sure dieting or they're maybe engaging in pseudo dieting and they know it's not working for them, it's not sustainable, it's not getting them the results they want. What is a mindset shift they can make to get off the roller coaster and start to embrace food freedom?
I think that's very difficult one to make, and it's like a work in progress. Like even with my clients, it's not like they have this magic moment where it's like there's total shift has happened. It's like the whole time we're working together, they're working on that and beyond, right? But I think the first, I guess, shift to make is recognizing that what they're doing is dieting and what they're doing isn't necessarily healthy behaviors. So that even that part alone can be quite difficult. And then second is recognizing and understanding all the reasons that dieting isn't in their best interest in terms of the ineffectiveness, whether they're looking at the research, they're looking at their past attempts with dieting, they're looking at whatever else, right? Recognizing the harms it can cause or it has caused for them. And recognizing how much it actually impacts their quality of life. Because if you can start recognizing those things, then and realize there's really it's doing nothing good for you, that
Yeah.
makes it easier to at least take the next step. And then I think like the third one is more working on your body image, right?
Mhm.
So what you have been told is healthy and desirable essentially your whole life, which is very difficult. So really just understanding that health doesn't have a look and learning how to accept your body and learning to be okay with your body changing, even if it changes in the opposite direction you desire, which so body image work as a whole, which is very, very difficult.
Yeah, yeah, it's a big job, right? It's a lot to unpack all of those societal beliefs and, like, beauty standards that we've been taught for a very long time, but it can be done. I'm living proof that it can be done, and, you can learn to think differently about bodies and about health and about yourself in your body, so, that's a really important first step to start with.
For
Okay,
sure,
so
and a lot of people think, like, "I could never love my body," like, that's just not in the cards for me, and it's not necessarily
Mhm.
about loving your body because some
Yeah.
people might not ever get there, right? But, like, learning how to just accept it and not letting your body image hold you back from doing things in life that you want to.
Absolutely. Yeah. Right. I think that like as much as I love the body positivity movement, I think that's one of the downsides is like we've been fed this alternate belief that now we have to like love our body and all of our cellulite and fat rolls and whatever. But really, what if we could just be neutral? What if we could just accept that we just have a body and it's the thing that we move around life in and it allows us to do all of the things that we like to do and it doesn't have to be this object to be admired.
For sure, exactly. Learn to appreciate your body for what it can do for you.
Mhm. Mhm. Okay, so then what's the alternative to dieting or pseudo dieting? And how does a person begin to change their relationship with food?
Yeah. So if your goal is to improve your health, there's definitely more to it, I guess, than just stopping dieting, right? Because if you just stop dieting, it doesn't necessarily mean you're going to make healthy choices and improve your relationship with food. But the approach I use, you use as well, right? Intuitive eating,
Mhm.
which I'm sure you've discussed on here multiple times. So I'm not sure how much detail you want me to go in with it.
Go ahead, share a little synopsis because
Sure. Why not? People need to hear it over and over again because it's
okay.
actually a really hard concept to grasp because there's so many moving pieces. Like I know when I first learned about intuitive eating, I was always, and people would say, "What is it?" And I'm like, "I don't know. Like I can't explain it. I've read the book, I've done this, but I can't explain it." But essentially, it's a non-weight focused, non-diet self-care approach to eating, and a lot of people, when they start learning about intuitive eating, I feel like they think it's just means like eat what you want whenever you want without considering your health. And that's
Yeah.
not it at all. Like it's about eating in ways that honor your health, but without that restrictive mindset or behaviors attached to it.
Mhm. Yeah, I love that definition because I mean, when I first learned about intuitive eating, I'm going to confess I saw it as a free pass. Like, it's the eat anything diet.
Yeah.
Yeah. Right? No. I mean, yes, you get to eat whenever you're hungry and you get to eat the foods that you enjoy without restriction, but it's not to say that it's giving up on your health and not caring about yourself. It's like bringing all of that into one beautiful framework. So, what are your first steps when you're supporting someone to learn intuitive eating? How do you help them begin that process?
I think the first two are actually kind of the first two principles, which there's 10 principles and there's no order to them. It just seems that those are always the first two I'm working on with clients. We can be working on a lot at a times, and after the first two, it kind of can go in multiple directions. But first is always rejecting the diet mentality, which again, a lot of times when people come to me, they've already started rejecting it because they followed me on Instagram and seen that. And that's kind of why they're coming to me a lot of the times, not always. But again, that's a piece they're working on for a long, long time. Like that's a hard you don't just overcome diet culture and reject the diet mentality after reading about it once.
Yeah.
But the second part I think would be honoring your hunger because a lot of people, another issue people come to me with is overeating. And it's always, oh, I can't stop eating at night. And whenever we look at what they're eating, they're never eating enough during the day. So we're always looking at eating regular meals and really getting back in tune with hunger cues because I have people that will, skip breakfast and not eat till supper or, eat breakfast and then not again till supper. Like there's these really long gaps and they don't even feel hunger. They don't notice it until again in the evening or until they get really ravenously hungry and then they're overeating. So making sure they're eating regularly is always like a big starting point for me and my
Yeah.
clients.
That's a really important point that you bring up about disconnecting from our hunger cues, not being able to feel it. Like that's a pretty common side effect after years of dieting and being told like you can only eat at these times. Never mind when you're hungry, you can only eat at breakfast, lunch, and supper and snack times. So, how do you help people reconnect to that feeling if they are saying they're not hungry till supper? How do you help them reconnect to that feeling when they don't
Yeah.
feel it?
That one's also hard.
Yeah.
It takes a long time, but it's always just kind of kind of making it more of a schedule. And so actually with a client, when we first started, we kind of made a bit of a schedule. And like I said, that, this might feel a little diety initially that you kind of have a schedule you're trying to follow, but it's totally different than a diet because with a diet, it never ends. There's always a schedule. With intuitive eating, if you give yourself this schedule to eat regularly, eventually you're going to get to the point where you don't need to have this schedule in your head because you're going to recognize your hunger cues. Or you're
Mhm.
going to know if I don't have this snack, I'm going to be really hungry later and I'm going to overeat and all those things, right? So it's putting in those regular meals, putting a bit of a schedule in place just to get them on the right track. And then they'll start noticing those more subtle hunger cues. But yeah, my one client that was doing it, she was like, you know what, I actually thought this was going to be a lot harder. Like dieting has been. I was a little nervous it was going to be like past diets, but it's not. It's like I enjoy eating now. I know that I need to eat now. So yeah.
Yeah, it's a big process about coming back into your body, right? And rebuilding that sense of trust because I mean, really the bottom line of dieting is it teaches us not to trust our body and to ignore the signals that our body sends us. So, I think that's a really important piece when you're learning this is to like spend time connecting with the signals in your body and learning that they're there for a reason. You can trust them.
100%. And even like what I hear a lot from like macro counting and what I experienced myself was, um, it helped me realize that, I didn't need to be eating as much as I was, or it helped me realize how much I actually need. But it's like, it's actually really disconnecting you and like tricking you. Like your hunger cues are just becoming blunted over time. And now when you stop that, you're not going to be able to recognize those things and you're going to continue to, try and follow that plan, but you're actually under eating and you're not giving your body the nutrients it actually needs, right? You
Mhm,
may feel full because you've tricked your body, but now your body's not getting the nutrients it needs.
mhm. And so then cravings and binge eating ensues later in the evening.
Oh, 100%. And that's a very big one, right? Because the more you restrict a food, the greater the desire there is to eat that food. And then when you've been restricting a food for so long and then you finally give in, then there's this like increased reward response in the brain that takes place that causes these cravings to happen, right? There's a lot of like going on in the body too. It's like your hormones and certain neurotransmitters that go off that result in this. It's like it's not at all this issue of willpower that people think it is.
Yeah, and it's not simple math, calories in, calories out.
Oh
Like,
gosh. No. Not at all.
yeah. I mean, it's our bodies are not that simple, and I think that's the coolest thing, right? Is that there's so many of these feedback back loops and things going on inside that are like it's really, really fascinating and miraculous. Uh,
Mhm.
and
And I think the point I made earlier too, which can be scary. I don't remember how much detail I went into, but when people are restricting, and like I said, your metabolism can slow down. So then when you start eating again normally, you'll probably gain the weight back. But the thing is, if you are fueling your body, like giving it the fuel it needs every single day, and occasionally your calorie needs and the amount you eat is going to vary each day, right? But if your
Mhm.
body knows it's always going to have the fuel it needs, it's not going to feel a need to hold on to extra fuel and calories, right? So
Yeah.
if you eat more than you actually need in one day, your body's not going to be like, okay, let's store this as fat. Let's just gain a bunch of weight. Like that's not how it works. Whereas when you're restricting, it might take it that way because it's scared. It's scared it's going to be starved again.
Mhm. Mhm. Yep. So your body will, and like as you rebuild this relationship of trust, your body will feel safe to reach its happy weight.
For sure, and once it's there, if you're not fighting that happy weight, it's gonna stay there other than, like, normal lifetime changes, right?
Mhm.
Different life stages and all those things, but otherwise, yeah, your body's not looking for reasons to put on a bunch of weight or lose a bunch of weight once it's at a weight that it's happy at and it's getting fueled appropriately at.
Yeah. That's so great. Okay, as we begin to wind this conversation up, I always like to ask a question at the end around because this is the Power in Motion podcast. I want to talk about how embracing intuitive eating and breaking free of dieting actually can help a woman like step into her power and be her most authentic self. What are your
Yeah,
thoughts?
I feel like dieting does take over so much control over your life, right? You're always trying to, like, change yourself.
Mhm.
Um, Whereas with intuitive eating, you're just embracing life as it is, right? You have all of this freedom now because what diets have taken away, right? Like what we've said, like the amount of impact they actually have on your life. And it's because you're trying to change your body this whole time. So to be able to learn how to accept your body and just be happy with where you're at and be able to enjoy all the little things life has to offer, I think it's an amazing change.
Yeah. Yeah, it's so true. Like when I think about how much brain space dieting and controlling food took up back in those days, like, yeah, like, no wonder I wasn't getting anything else done, right? Like
Oh gosh, yes. Yeah, the amount of things that hold you back from right. And I reflect on these things all the time personally. I'm like, oh, I'm so happy. Like I found intuitive eating. I'm so happy I am where I am because, I'll go to a party and it's like I can eat the cake, or like I don't have to like eat my own meal ahead of time. I can accept a dinner invite last minute, even if it goes outside of my what I plan to eat for supper that night, or like even the body work stuff. Like the body image work is a big part of intuitive eating too. And just the other day we were going on the boat and I'm like, before I would avoid this stuff because I feel like I should be in a swimsuit, and I didn't want to show off my body. And then if I didn't wear a swimsuit, I'd feel like I'm judged for like, why are you not wearing a swimsuit going in the water, So just
Mhm.
those little things, like I notice things on the daily that have changed.
Yeah. Yeah. It's so liberating.
Hmm.
So amazing. Well, Krista, this has been a great conversation, and thanks so much for coming on and sharing your expertise with our listeners. Is there any parting thoughts that you had before we sign off for the day?
No, nothing else. Just if you want to keep following along, I share a lot of stuff like this on my Instagram. So find me at dietitian.krista on Instagram. And I share a lot of tips like this, dieting myths, intuitive eating tips and tricks, and more because, like I said before, my goal is to help as many women as possible overcome diet culture and stop dieting for good and just heal their relationships with food and their body.
Fantastic. I will link all of those in the show notes. So make sure that you go and click those links and give Krista a follow. Thanks so much for coming on the show today, Krista. It's so appreciated.
No problem. Thanks so much for having me.
Thanks for tuning into the Power in Motion podcast today. If you love what you're learning here, then I invite you to take the next step of embodying these concepts into your own life so that you can live your healthiest, happiest life and never again feel held back by your body. Coaching is the fastest, most efficient pathway to taking what you know in your head to actually applying it and seeing results. Whether you're looking to make changes around movement, food, body image, or all three, I'm here to help you nurture a kind, respectful, and trusting relationship with your body so you can feel your very best. Click the link in the show notes to book a free consultation, and together we'll uncover what's getting in the way of you having the results you want. You'll leave this call knowing exactly what you need to work on, and together we'll explore whether one of my coaching offers is a good fit for you. I can't wait to meet you.